All right, so these are our placards. They were made with a grant from the Access Jacks, which helps break down barriers for all kinds of disabilities. But on this one, we focused on the deaf and hard of hearing. These were created with that grant, and they went into production, and we released them around the beginning of last year, around January, February of 2020. And then because of the global pandemic and everything and the world turning upside down in March of 2020, the showcase on this is a little slow, but we're finally able to do it now. I think we were holding out for in-person, but we settled for Zoom. So here we are. So better late than never. So these cards are both for the officers, and they're for the community. And the idea is to provide effective communication out on the street for a relatively short and quick communication. Traffic stops typically don't take longer than about 10 minutes. So this is something that makes that communication a little bit easier. It's got tips on here for both the officer and the drivers. We want to remind the officers to get the driver's attention. We want them to make eye contact when they speak. We want them to speak clearly and in a normal tone. And whether or not that driver needs a qualified sign language interpreter. If it's an involved situation involving, criminal citations or a vehicle crash, then that may be appropriate. But we rely on the community to tell us what you need. You let us know what kind of communication best suits you. And also remind the officer not to shine the flashlight in your eyes if you're trying to read the card or look at the officer's lips. And then down here is what kind of interpretation service would be best for you. And then on the other side, it makes it easy to explain what we're asking for. There's a driver's license, registration, insurance, whether or not you have a concealed weapons permit. That's important, obviously, for safety. We want to know if there's a firearm in the car, even if it's there legally. And then these are for what sort of violation it may be, whether it's running a stop sign, speed, broken equipment like a headlight, expired tag, and then whether you're warned, ticketed, arrested would be a little more serious, or whether it's something as simple as running out of gas, you're lost, need a hospital, or need a wrecker service. So these have been out, like I said, for about a year, and I did get some feedback from some of our officers. And the good news is we're using them. We don't pull over a lot of deaf and hard of hearing people. You all must be great drivers, because it doesn't happen often, but it has happened a few times, and these cards did help that communication. Before we had these cards, a lot of officers would use the note function on their smartphones and just pass messages back and forth, or use a notepad, whatever the driver is comfortable with. We also had a situation where one of our officers knew a little bit of ASL, but the driver was a Spanish sign language, and so the card helped with some of the pictures and the explanations that not only broke through the sign language barrier, but also the different language, because it was an unusual circumstance, but luckily it worked out pretty well. So every one of our officers, there's a little over 1,800 sworn officers. They all have these, and they've also gone out to different community groups, especially the Center for Independent Living has a bunch of these. So if you would like one or need one, that's where you can get it. I think we also probably have some here. I know we have a lot at the police station, because they're in supply in case we run out of them or whatever. We made several thousand, so we should not run out of these anytime soon. And if you have questions about the card, we can entertain those. And then after that, I'll go into text 911.
We do have a question. Several people have asked if the cards are going to be shared and offered in other counties, given the amount of deaf people in the state of Florida.
That's a great question. I only work for Sheriff Williams in Duval County, so I don't know. I don't know if other counties are doing something like this. I know they're involved in the text 911, but I'm not aware of other counties doing something like this. This is something that a lot of jurisdictions are doing. I think we probably stole this idea from somebody who was doing it through the grant and through those collaborations. So we're not ashamed to steal a good idea if it's going to help our citizens out. But as far as other counties, I'm not aware.
Do you anticipate being willing to share your resource with other counties if they were to
Sure.
interested? Okay.
Oh yeah, we share ideas all the time. We are constantly talking to other law enforcement agencies. I mean, we're here to help. This is not proprietary. We're not selling these or trying to hog it. We're more than willing to share. So if you live out of county and your agency doesn't have this, they can contact me and I'll be happy to share it, and we can get the information out.
Awesome.
Yeah, we share stuff all the time.
Just reading our questions here. Does anyone see any questions in the gallery that I may be missing? We have Miss Stacy Brown speaking. Interpreter, let me know when you can see her. Okay.
I can't see her.
You can't see her. Okay. She's asking.
But what about deaf consumers who are taken to in an ambulance, the hospital, or other emergency services? Will they have a card similar to that for them?
I don't know if JFRD has anything like this. I'm not aware, but if it's a crash, we would have, I'm not sure what their policies in dealing with these kinds of situations, but if it's a crash, there will be an officer there. So they would be more than willing to share this with fire rescue, but these really pertain to the traffic stop themselves, not necessarily, medical care and that sort of thing. It's sort of a different focus at that point.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you. Stuart Black saying, interpreter Joshua. Yes, hello. My name is Stuart. And so I'm speaking about when the police arrest during a traffic stop, when they're pulling you over, if the cop thought that they saw a gun in your hand or something when you're trying to roll down the window, I mean, shouldn't you wait? I mean, if they think something's in your hand, it seems that the police, if they think they see a gun, but there's nothing. Okay, because you're in the car and you sign with your hands, and so they think that there's a gun, and it's like, no, there's nothing. So it's being aware, So what would you do? What would the police do in that situation?
Well, I don't think two empty hands signing would be mistaken for a firearm.
And the visor card should be kept up on your visor.
Yeah.
Yes. So yes, you use your hands to sign, to roll down the windows, and yes, Angela, that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, if it's at night, turning on the interior light certainly makes the situation a little easier to see what's going on inside the car. But it's
I got it.
I don't think holding a placard is gonna create some sort of stressful incident.
Okay, we're gonna just take a break and go ahead and switch interpreters. And if we could, before you begin signing, let me spotlight you so that we have you on the recording signing as well, and then everyone can see your question at the same time. Okay. Okay, and we have switch. And who would like to ask their next question?
This is Daniel Holland. I wanted to ask if we do get that card, or is that card available online?
He just has to change his view.
So where can we get that card? Is that available online? Do we have to go somewhere?
I believe the Center for Independent Living has it. Angela, is it on your website?
We have them in our office and we've been mailing them out to all of our
Okay.
consumers.
Okay.
So if you want one, just let me know and I'll send you one.
Thanks.
Yeah, please do. Thanks.
Sure.
Is CIL in the same place, right? Or have they moved?
Can y'all hear me? Did I unmute myself?
Yes, we can hear you, Angie.
Okay. Yes, we're still in the same spot. We're still not open for seeing consumers right now at this time because of COVID, but we're moving toward that. So we'll
Gotcha.
let you know.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
When I spotlight someone, it takes their view out of us. So he's just trying to figure that out really quick. If you want to do gallery view, it'll be easier.
So I had a question. I was told, myself and other people growing up were told that we were deaf and dumb and experienced a lot of pain through that.
I retired from the state of Georgia.
And I retired from Georgia and had a master's of social work. Just 1 second for the interpreter. So I've had a lot of experiences in different areas with education and everything. And I'm currently working with education and police relations, but virtually, to help people with disabilities and senior citizens. So one thing I think that we all have to do is be advocates. And we are accessible, make sure that we are accessible for everybody. Just 1 second for the interpreter. I don't think he can see me.
Mm-hmm.
And his mic's muted.
Mm-hmm. I asked him to unmute, but
Can you unmute him?
For him, unfortunately.
So I think it's important that we continue this advocacy and continue education in this sector. And also important that we vote so that we can get the improvements that we need.
I want to thank you all for being here for this.
And thank you for being here for us.
All right. Okay, let me look at our chat really quick. Okay, I'm gonna take a look at the gallery. Does anyone in the gallery have a question? You wanna raise your hand, I'll look for you. No question. Okay, we have one from Miss Beverly Earnhardt.
Hi, yes, I've been pulled over by the police before and I've gestured to them that I'm deaf and they still continue to speak at me even though I gesture to them that I'm deaf. I've had a passenger who's hearing and I have to rely on them to communicate with the officer because the officer can't communicate with me directly. So is that something the officer refused to use any other means of communication like writing or anything? So I think that's one thing that's important for officers to realize is that they need to be willing to communicate with the deaf people directly and not rely on hearing people who may be in the car as well to communicate with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry you had that kind of experience. We get training on this at least, well, I know in the academy, and then we continue that at least once a year. And the training came up again when these placards were new. So that is something that we're trying to remind our officers of. I know they can rely on another interpreter or someone who's present with the driver. We make it very clear in our policy that if you get to, especially a domestic situation, you don't know if that family member who's interpreting is the suspect or not. So we make it very clear to our officers not to family if you're not sure of the relationship or what the situation is. So yeah, I'm sorry you had that experience, but hopefully we'll improve on that.
So I think the question would emphasize on, one moment, I don't know if she can see that I'm speaking, I'll hold.
And especially for children, not relying on children and deaf, or not relying on children of deaf and hard of hearing people to communicate with their parents who are deaf.
Right.
Yes, when you have someone who is hearing in the vicinity, do you have your officers trained to make sure that they engage with the deaf individual that's involved, or is that not necessary for you guys when you interact?
Well, it depends on the comfort level and the preference of the deaf person there. And we're supposed to figure out from them what would be effective communication. What is your comfort level? If the person you're with is if you're okay with that, then that's what we'll use, especially if it's a very minor and short duration. But it really depends on the person what method they prefer and what the situation is. I have some numbers that are kind of interesting. We don't, as big as we are, we don't have that many interactions with the deaf and hard of hearing community. It's really surprising. We only arrested about 20 deaf or hard of hearing individuals last year. So it's a very small number that get arrested. It's also a very small number that get reported in our reports. Like, for example, we had over 1.4 million 911 calls last year. Only of those calls, only about 800,000 ended up in a citizen interaction. Well, in 2020, we had 157 reports that referenced a deaf or hard of hearing victim or witness in the case. So it's unfortunately, it's a very rare occurrence, but when it happens, we have to make sure our officers handle it correctly and have to make sure that they're familiar with our policy, because it's not something that's going to happen every day, but when it does, we have to get it right.
Awesome. Okay. Let me go to our gallery again. Anyone else want to raise their hand? I'm looking out. I have one, Mr. Jordan.
Hi, yeah, I had a question. I was wondering if
Yeah, actually the host will go ahead and explain it. Yes, we're here to talk about the cards while you're driving. Mhm. The caller is asking if you are including St. Augustine in this call, if the content involves St. Augustine.
No, this is just Duval County, Jacksonville, consolidated city.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we're gonna go to the gallery again. Make sure your questions are related to the communication placard. We're gonna go to the text to 911 questions next. So anything related to the card that we posted online that you saw during the presentation, any other questions related to that? You wanna raise your hand? I'm looking, make sure I don't miss anybody. Okay, well, officer, I think we are ready to move on.
Okay. If you want to pull up that PowerPoint.
Okay. I need to make this smaller. There we go. Go away. Okay.
I actually do have one more question while you're figuring that out, Miss Angie.
Okay.
When a cop pulls you over, if something happens where you need to be handcuffed, what is your communication protocol with the deaf person after that?
It's going to depend on what effective communication we had leading up to that. We're not just going to throw cuffs on you without some sort of interaction, or, I mean, it's going to depend on whether or not we were exchanging notes, or if we were using an interpreter, or if we were using one of the remote video monitors we have all over the city. You're going to be told that you're under arrest, and then you're going to be advised of your Miranda warnings. And an arrest, I would think in most cases, would probably involve having an interpreter there. So we're going to let you know, especially if the individual is being cooperative. There's no resistance. There's no reason to be unnecessarily, rough or anything like that. So it should come with an explanation and a warning that it's about to happen.
Is there any point after you handcuff a deaf person that you would unhandcuff them for communication?
Sure. I mean, it depends on what they're being arrested for, but if it's the type of crime where we need to then have an interview downtown with one of the detective divisions, you will get the handcuffs removed so you can communicate with, through the interpreter whenever questions are asked. That's not going to happen in the back of a police car.
Okay, great. She says thank you.
Ready for
Daniel Holland.
Oh, one moment, let me get him on view. 1 second. And I see. 1 second. Okay.
I have a question. I was wondering if, for example, an officer were to walk up behind me and I let them know that I'm deaf, either through gesture or whatever, say I don't have the card, and they are looking at me uncertain whether or not I am actually deaf, but I try to communicate to them that I am. If they have any problem with me or see me to be a threat, would they handcuff me? And if afterwards, after they put the handcuffs on, if they
I don't
handcuff me
want them to
behind my
handcuff
back,
me
because I
I'm
wouldn't
deaf.
be able to communicate, but they wouldn't listen to what I'm trying to communicate to them, how would I avoid that kind of a situation? Is it possible to be handcuffed in front of my body rather than behind me if it were to happen, so that I would still be able to at least write notes to communicate rather than having my hands tied behind my back and being thrown in the car?
Yeah, the best advice is just to
Because-
remain. Go ahead.
Go ahead, officer.
Just remain calm, and we don't just handcuff people without either you knowing you did something wrong that required it, or if it's like a crime in progress or a violent felony. But we don't just snatch people and put handcuffs on them without some sort of interaction beforehand. And obviously we know that you can't communicate with your hands behind your back, and that's typically how we transport individuals because it's the safest way. We have lots of very amazing contortionists who can very quickly, do a lot with the handcuffs in front of them. Some of them can even get the handcuffs from behind their back in front. So safety wise, that's why you're handcuffed behind your back. But that's not just gonna, I would be shocked if that happened. I don't know what the circumstances would be that would create that kind of situation.
So to clarify, do you mean that that you would be sure that the person knows what's going on and that the reason for handcuffing them is obviously a valid and safety concern for the officer, and that's why you would choose handcuffing prior to transportation?
Correct. I mean, we're more likely to get cooperation from an individual if we explain the situation to the individual. We're not looking to just grab somebody and because that's going to be stressful for anyone. Anyone's gonna have questions and probably resist because they don't know what's going on. So it's very important for us to explain the situation beforehand.
All right, thank you.